Hello students, this is a continuation to the previous video. So when I was recording the video as the time ended, so I abruptly had to end that video. So coming to the adaptive radiation in amphibians, first of all, let us know what is adaptive radiation. So adaptive radiation is a evolutionary process. So by this process, one group of organism will be diversified into different types of forms. So we can say that one type of ancestral species will be developed into many different types of offspring species. So this diversification is due to the changes in the environment. So, and these environmental changes, they will throw some different types of effects on the ancestral group, so that these ancestral organisms that have adapted to or that are living in different types of environment, finally they will develop different types of changes in their bodies. So all these different types of bodies, finally they are going to create new type of form or a different form in the offspring. So like this way, the adaptive radiation is a evolutionary process. This is a very, very important one. And this adaptive radiation only is responsible for vast biodiversity within a group. And this adaptive radiation will start with a single ancestor. And due to this process, what happens, speciation takes place. So what is a speciation? A speciation is nothing but formation of new species. So due to the adaptive radiation process, a single ancestor will be developed into different types of species. So speciation is a form of adaptive radiation, or adaptive radiation is resulting in speciation. And in speciation, speciation is nothing but developing new phenotypic changes, new phenotypic characters in the organism lead to the development of new species. So phenotypic adaptations, they are adapted, or they develop these phenotypic adaptations in order to survive in different environmental conditions. So the phenotypic adaptations may be in morphological traits, or they may be in physiological traits also. So phenotypic adaptations are changes that occur in these ancestral organisms may reflect in physiological traits, or they may also reflect in physiological traits also. So the prototypical example for this adaptive radiation can be seen in finch speciation in Galapagos Islands. The finch birds are called as Darwin's finches. So some conditions will be there for this adaptive radiation to occur. So out of them, the first condition is that a new habitat has to be opened up to this ancestral species. If there is no change in the habitat of the organisms, then the adaptive radiation will not occur, or speciation will not occur. So speciation or adaptive radiation will occur only when there comes a change in the habitat. So either habitat conditions has to change, or the organisms have to go to a new habitat. So in this case, we can say some examples like volcano eruption. For example, usually most volcanoes are hidden in the sea and underground. So when a volcano erupts, that may create a new island in the middle of the ocean. So earlier, some organisms they used to live in water, but due to the volcano eruption, they developed a new what's a new island. So the new island is a new habitat. So this new island becomes a habitat for some of the animals. Earlier, they were living in sea waters, but now due to the new habitat formed, they go onto this new habitat, or they go onto this island, and then they will start living on that island. So like this volcano eruption may create new habitats, and formation of a large new lake habitat also. So due to some tectonic plate movements, or due to some geological changes, some new habitats also may be formed. Earlier, some place may be in low heights. Now it may go to new elevations. Earlier, there was no lake, but due to the changes in the underground soil layers, some a new lake also may be formed. So all these geographical or all these geological changes also may create new habitats. So otherwise, we can say another example, that's extinction event also. So an extinction event. So during extinction events, most of the animals will die, and the only few animals will left are they manage to survive. So the animals that manage to survive, they move to new areas. So in the new areas, undoubtedly they will be exposed to new habitats. So after an extinction, moving to new areas, volcano eruptions, or sudden changes in the tectonic plates of the earth crust, all these changes, they will open new environments or new habitats to the species. So this is very, very important. Without occurring these changes, without exposing the animals to new habitats, adaptive radiation cannot occur. And another condition required to adaptive radiation to occur is the new habitat should be relatively isolated. So the new habitat should be isolated with the previous or past habitat or old habitat. So if the new habitat is in continuation with the old habitat, then what happens? The animals can easily go back to old habitat so that they will not try to develop any changes in their body structures or in physiological traits. So that when it is isolated, then only they are forcefully exposed to the adaptive radiation process or speciation process. So that's why new habitat has to be opened up to the ancestral species, and this new habitat should be isolated with the previous habitat. And this new habitat has it should have a wide availability of niche space. So niche space is also very, very important. The ancestral organisms, they should find a space, a niche space to live in, to survive in the new habitat. If there is no niche is there that helps them to survive, that helps them to live in, then the animals, all the ancestral animals, they will extinct. So no adaptive radiation will occur. So new habitat has to develop. The new habitat has to be isolated with previous one, but this new habitat, it also should provide some space to live into these organisms. Then only in that niche space the organisms will survive, and finally in accordance with these changes in the new habitat, they will develop some morphological changes, some physiological changes in their bodies and in physiology. All these changes in the course of time, they will help them, the ancestral species, to develop into a new species. So like this process develops in the formation of new species, or it helps in speciation process. If one ancestral group of organisms split into different habitats, if they split into different habitats, and all these different habitats, they are very different from the previous one, and all the new habitats are different from each other. So then each new habitat organisms are going to develop different types of features in them. So after a considerable period of time, when we watch all the organisms in the new habitats, we cannot find any similarities in them. So then all the organisms will look different. So if a layman watches them, sees them, he thinks that they are not related at all. But if we consider the internal structures, anatomical structures, all those things, then only we can come to know that they are related, they are phylogenetically related. But due to the changes in the habitats, due to adaptive radiation process, they have developed some new structures. Due to the new structures only, they are looking different, but they are actually related. They are very closely related to each other. So this thing can be seen only when we consider all the anatomical features only. So like this, these are the three conditions. New habitat has to be opened up. New habitat should be isolated from previous one, and new habitat should provide some space, niche space to live in for these ancestral species. Then only adaptive radiation occurs and new species will develop. So coming to the adaptive radiation in amphibia, actually many scientists are doing experiments, researches, considerable work in this adaptive radiation process, but they are mostly confined to mammals adaptive radiation only. And apart from mammals, some importance is given to reptiles radiation also, adaptive radiation in reptiles also. But many scientists, they neglected this adaptive radiation in amphibians, even though we can see that this is the one ancestral amphibian, Eriops like thing. Okay, this is Eriops like animals fossil. So this is the stem amphibian, or this is the primitive amphibian or ancestral amphibian. Okay, so these ancestral amphibians, during the period when they were surviving on planet Earth, so these ancestral amphibians, they forced to go into or move into different habitats. So some earlier amphibians, they forced to go onto lands or plants or terrestrial habitats. Some other forced to enter into burrowing habitats or burrows, and some other forced to live in completely in shallow water. So the three groups of animals were forced to move into three different habitats. So as these animals, they are forced to move on to land or terrestrial habitats. So in terrestrial habitats, they developed some leaping organs or hind limbs developed more than the uh, forelimbs. So forelimbs are shorter in all frogs, and hind limbs are greatly developed, highly developed in this organism. So this structure enables them to leap on the land. So leaping mode of life or jumping mode of life developed due to these changes only. So the terrestrial habitats help these organisms to develop this type of structures, and having tail also was useless for them, so that in adult life they lost the tail. But coming to the some animals which are forced to live complete in shallow waters, in ponds or in rivers, so they retained this tail region. Why? Because tail is very, very important for these organisms to swim in waters, to move in waters, to maintain body balance in water. So tail is important. So tail developed highly developed in these salamanders or urodilans, and they do not require highly developed limbs in these organisms, so that limbs are somewhat poorly developed in urodilans when compared to anurans. For anurans, limbs are very, very important. All the terrestrial animals, they should have a very strongly developed limbs. For that purpose, anurans develop limbs, and but these organisms, they do not require limbs. Why? Because they are living in shallow water, so that in shallow waters, this tail helps them to swim in water. And when the water is shallow, these poorly developed limbs are enough for them to walk in the water, shallow waters. Why? Because the shallow water helps them to this what bear the weight of this animal. But these organisms, but these land animals or land or terrestrial amphibians or endurance, they have to bear their total body weight on their own. Here, the water is not present. So, in order to avoid the gravitational force, the endurance, they have to avoid the gravitational force. So, to avoid the gravitational force, they have to develop a very strongly developed limb. So these strongly developed limbs help them to maintain or bear their body weight. So in terrestrial habitats, limbs are very, very important. Limbs have to be strong. If the limbs are weak, the animals cannot walk, or the animals cannot jump, or the animals cannot run also. So all the running animals on land, jumping animals on land, or crawling animals, no, no, sorry, not crawling animals, running animals. So all these terrestrial animals, they compulsorily, they have to have a very strongly developed limb. So limbs development is the major change that took place in these organisms. And as the tail is useless, they lost tail also. And coming to this shallow water animals, they maintain this type of structure, lizard-like structure. Coming to this apodons or gymnophianans, so as they are forced to live into burrows, so they do not require any limbs. So that's why they became limbless organisms. So that's why the mode of life, the mode of habitat they have selected to live in, force these organisms to gain this type of body structure. So when we see the three body structures, normal person who do not have the knowledge of zoology subject will think that they are not related at all. He thinks that these are snakes-like or worm-like or earthworm-like structures. These are frogs and these are lizard-like structures, but all these are amphibians. So they may live some time on the land, but to lay eggs, they have to go to waters only. So all these animals compulsorily, they lay eggs in water or nearby water only. So like this, the adaptive radiation in these organisms has resulted in the three forms in this amphibia group. One is limbless animals, one is urodelans, which have poorly developed limbs and highly developed tail, and another one is endurance, which have strongly developed limbs and lost tail. So in remaining things, all they are almost similar. So except these external changes, remaining things are almost same. And in this, they are very cylindrical in structure. So burrow life requires this type of body structure only. And this lizard-like structure is very useful in living in shallow waters. And this body is also somewhat long but slender body. But these frogs, they have broad body. So the body is broad when compared to these two groups of organisms. So breadth of the bodies and shape of the body and development of limbs or losing limbs or development of tail. So in these changes, in these features only, some changes have been taken place in the primitive ancestor amphibians that chosen to live in different habitats. So the burrowing animals, burrowing ancestors developed changes and finally they got this type of structures. Shallow water living ancestors developed some changes and finally they got this type of structure. And mostly terrestrial living ancestors, they developed these type of anatomical changes and they got this type of structure. So this is the adaptive radiation in amphibians. So with this, we have finished this 2.2 topic. In next class, we will meet with another topic.